you. Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining this session, which is a very practice-focused session. As I mentioned earlier, we're having a Menti just to kind of kick things off, and you'll be running through the Menti on your own because we can't have two screens. So we're just going to kick off. I'm Kiran, work as Education Insight and Evaluation Analyst in the Faculty of Natural Sciences EdTech Lab, and I'm joined by Chiandra today.
Yes, and my name is Chiandra Jayasekera. I'm the Learning Design Manager within the Faculty of Natural Science at Imperial College. So welcome everyone.
So to give you context for our talk today, we thought it would be good to talk about what happened a few years back, which is 2018, when a learning and teaching strategy was launched. That meant all modules and programs underwent a curriculum review, the delivery was redesigned, and it was a strong focus on being technology enhanced, and also launch of online courses. And then came COVID with its trials and tribulations. The positives of that was that we really could pivot online, and we also experimented with mixed mode teaching, and that's also called like flex hybrid teaching. And at the same time, we restructured our team and started working in a very different manner. And I'll come back to that in a minute. With this evolution of it, it's still continuing. Literally last week, we have new aims for learning and teaching and a new college strategy, which will build upon the strengths that we have. So I did mention we restructured as a team. We used to be divided in different teams dealing with technology, design, evaluation quite separately, even though we were part of the EdTech team. And whilst we're thinking about the restructure, we were heavily influenced by Goodyear and Dimitriadis, who was kind of championing thinking about design for learning in a way much more, I think, deeper than we normally do, and go beyond designing the learning activities. We're also using, I'm sure several of us are using ABC workshops as one way to do that. So we wanted to push the envelope and start thinking about the concepts around design for configuration, which basically means you're thinking about how students are adjusting to the design or the learning activities that you're making or the academics are doing. Design for orchestration, another concept, which means you're supporting the academics to facilitate the teaching in live teaching. Design for reflection, that there's inbuilt data points that you can collect, opportunities for reflection, and thinking about ahead, really, how to incorporate that. And design for redesign. So you're very consciously making room for modification and change, and thinking, not doing that as an afterthought, but actually planning and assuming that is what's going to happen. Next time there will be a reiteration of the course. So today we have a case in particular we're going to talk about.
Yes, so hopefully over the next couple of slides, I'll give you a bit of an overview of the program and the module that kind of peer reviews are done in, which is kind of the whole concept this is set around. So the machine learning and data science program was launched the master's was launched in 2020 as a flagship program. And within that, we have kind of approximately 11 modules that are taught over 2 years, fully online as a part-time program. And generally, the students that we have on it are professionals who are working full-time, some who are studying part-time. So far, we've had 2 cohorts on this program, approximately 50 students in each, and they're generally made up of UK and international students. And within these modules in the program, there's a kind of range of assessments that are being used. So there's group work, there's kind of essays, but there's also lab work that they do and kind of peer assessments as well. Sorry, just moving on to the next one. So the peer reviews that we're specifically talking about within this presentation is actually in relation to the ethics module of that program. Now, there's a couple of unique things in the way the ethics module is set up within this master's program in itself. So the ethics module is split into 3 separate parts, and it's delivered over the 2 years of the actual program. So that's one of the unique things about it in comparison to the other modules within this program. Another unique thing with this module is that it's also delivered in a shorter period of time. So over each of these parts is delivered over a 6-week period, whereas obviously the other modules are delivered over a 10-week period. So this one, in essence, starts later, but aligns with the other end dates of the other modules that are delivered on a given term. What we've got on the kind of right is just to kind of flavour off the other types of assessments, summative assessments that happen alongside the peer reviews. And kind of some of the pedagogical reasoning behind kind of going with the peer reviews was predominantly to kind of give students the flexibility, because these are busy students or in kind of full-time education, to give them flexibility, because what the students do within those peer reviews is that they submit 6 peer reviews, but only the 5 highest scoring ones are taken into consideration when the weighting is being calculated for a given part, for example. Another kind of rationale behind kind of pedagogical rationale for it was to build an online community. So having peer reviews consistently throughout all the parts of this particular module meant that the students kind of got into, because the way they have to submit it and the way they have to write it and review it is all kind of consistent. Obviously what changes is the kind of papers that they would review. However, the way they actually address it and give the feedback for their peers, as well as the way they address it, is kind of consistent. So that is all kind of part and parcel of how this was done. I don't know if Kiran really wants to add anything else at this point.
I'll just interject, there was high engagement, it's above 80%, even though the weighting is really, really nominal.
Yeah. And these are kind of the learning outcomes that are mapped to make the peer reviews directly from kind of the program perspective. And from the academics perspective, actually, one of the reasons why they wanted to kind of introduce peer reviews was initially, when it was first introduced for the first cohort, it was done as a formative assessment. But what you found was that the students were coming unprepared for the sessions, for the group discussions, just because they hadn't engaged with the material. So what was then decided was to actually start using the peer review mode, but with a nominal. So there's only 1% attached to each of the submissions that they make. But what that had kind of transpired in was that the students were actually engaging and they were doing the work. So when they came to the session, the group sessions and discussions, they were actually a lot more prepared. And from the academics perspective also, that it made the workload manageable because the peers were assessing each other's. However, obviously there was a moderation element from the academic as well, so there was a trust from the students as well, that it, and also helped kind of build this online sense of community. And I think it kind of speaks to the theme of kind of conference in like learning everywhere type of thing, because of the fact the students, when they've done their peer reviews themselves and submitted it, there's a time lapse between when they have to review their peers' work. So which kind of then enables them to kind of have that opportunity to be able to do it, but also be able to do it in a kind of a quick succession without it being too onerous on any of the individuals. And this is the kind of overview of the structure of how the actual rhetorical thesis is set up in the modules itself. So every week, the students will be given a paper, and then they would review that paper and submit their own. And then overall, what will happen is that they will then submit, for a given part, they will submit 6. And as I said, the 5 highest scoring of that 6 would be actually reviewed, and that's the one they will use for the weighting.
So just to recap the student journey then that we described, students read the paper, they write the thesis, submit it, review other students' theses. They have a rubric that they can or they should use, and they have to submit by a certain deadline.
So this is kind of an overview of how we set it up in the platform one, which is Coursera. One of the interesting things with Coursera is that prior to you actually launching the course, you need to have like a grading formula already set up in it, which needs to kind of tally up to it for all the summative assessment that is for a given module. So you need to set that up in the first instance. And then the others are just, we use the inbuilt tool within Coursera platform itself to be able to actually create the peer reviews and then set grading conditions. Now there's only two grading conditions within Coursera that it offers kind of, and the academic in this particular instance wanted the weighting to be kind of evenly distributed amongst the various different parts. So we were able to kind of select those. In addition to that, you have optional settings that you could choose the number of attempts that a student has at it or a passing threshold and so on and so forth. We don't tend to optimize those. But the other thing that is good is that we're able to add the rubric to it. So when the peers are doing the review, they all have that rubric available to them for every piece that they would need to review.
So we also have this assessment now in Blackboard. So the way we do it in terms of setup is using Trinity and Peer Mark, which it's an LTI integration in Blackboard. We have to specify the mark settings. We add the rubric. We use a workaround for 2 questions because it doesn't have the inbuilt yes and no option. So we kind of code that to yes being 1 and no being 2. And then we use the automated distribution of the peer reviews and just a screen grab to give you a flavor of some of the settings there. There's post-processing involved. So that was the setup, the student has a go, and then there's something.
So with platform 1, with the Coursera platform, what we find is there's a lot of collating that we need to do from when the students have made submissions, consolidating it, and then having to process the marks. What you see kind of on the right-hand side is like the spreadsheets that we use in order to be able to do the processing. So I don't know how well you can see the different colours on that screen, but but the first set of columns over here are kind of in the grey, which are the ones that we as EdTech staff generally need to input. And then those that are in kind of the pink, in the yellow are the ones that where the intermediate calculations that need to happen. And then finally, the ones in kind of pink are the ones where the sanity checks are done just to make sure the intermediate calculations that get carried out are absolutely correct, because this is a summative assessment and you need to ensure that, you know, everything that you kind of give to the students, even though it goes out with the caveat of obviously, you know, these are provisional grades, but even at this point, we need to ensure that. So the 2 last columns are the kind of the actual marks that the weighting that gets calculated. So one of them is done as the percentage, which is the last column, which is what the students would actually get released and be able to view. So through all of this kind of thing, what happens is obviously the academic will do the checks as well, just to ensure that they're all accurate before we actually then upload these marks and then have to release them to the students.
So in Blackboard, there's less of post-processing. Luckily for us, the academics are familiar with the platform and they decide to collate and review the marks. We do some processing in terms of the gradebook and ensure the edited marks are there, and the student receives the feedback and mark. So some of these processes are quite similar, and I'll just summarize again. So there's some type of setup that we have to do that academics would have to check, and the students, they complete their peer reviews, we collate the marks, or academic collects a mark, it's moderated, and then it's released by us, and the student finally receive feedback and marks. So more contrasting differences.
Yeah, I think these are kind of the main differences that we have in the 2 platforms. And the main thing I'd kind of, this is just a recap of what's already been mentioned, but one of the main 2 differences that I would kind of like to highlight is the question types that are available for the peer reviews in itself on the Coursera platform, where you have the yes, no responses, and the way the academic has actually structured the peer reviews itself. It enables us to use these yes or no for the first 4 parts of it. So the ownership on a student to do the peer review is a lot less, as if they had to do free text. But obviously there is an opportunity that is provided kind of with the last question for them with free text, where they can say what a student could, what a peer could review and enhance, or what they could actually, what they've done well. The other major difference that we have is within the Coursera platform, we have 3 instances of that relates to each part of the program rather than just one module. So I think those are the 2 main differences that I'd really like to just highlight off that platform.
I've already mentioned that we had to kind of find a workaround to code the yes and no response questions, and that's kind of a big difference. And in Blackboard, we're using one module space to deliver all 3 parts, so that probably brings more continuity for the students when they're navigating. So we can coming to the end here now. So we talked about design for redesign and how we had restructured our team. And I think it's really important to highlight that during these VLE transitions, what actually enabled us to do and work in this space. And some of these things probably resonate with you. We really found it being valuable to have done really strong requirements gathering, being part of those conversations when the program was being designed and the modules were being discussed beyond the module outline. And we did several wireframing or mock-ups or tests that we could show and discuss and to even show the student flow. We kept content separate from the VLE in a way, so it was really agnostic by having master copies of the rubric, of questions, of things like that, really helped us to transfer the content or transition. We have EdTech processes, documentation helps us with staff not being available or annual leave or sickness, things like that, and having a robust testing environment and just things that allows us to do things like student user accounts, sandboxes already set up to try the different ways things can happen for the student. So I think that is really underpinning for the way we work. It's obviously we're still threshing this out. This is still a bit new for us, I think, it's fair to say. And just to finish off with some of the student feedback so far, some of the feedback that we really like to see is that they found the peer reviews thought-provoking, it broadens their research, alerts them to the ethical side of the MLDS program. They also talked about it being well structured, the benefits of having materials online obviously helps them if they're working full time. Just general, quite positive comments there. We want to acknowledge.
What I just wanted to say was that on one of the previous slides, which you couldn't see because of this screen, because we wanted to make sure there was a bit of a balance, not just all the students saying how good it is. Is that the last comment on the previous slide was about students saying that perhaps they thought at some points peers were being too critical with regards to the kind of feedback that they were receiving. But I think from the fact that they knew that the academic was moderating it, I think that gave them a sense of kind of, that it wasn't as hypercritical as perhaps some initially thought it would be, and there was that moderation process kind of addressed that for them.
Yeah, Zach said that he addressed that in the next iteration. So yeah, just finishing off with acknowledging everyone who worked with the MLDS program and the support that they've given us, and to Zach, who's allowed us to use this module as a case study.